You've written about groupthink, and I think that's an
Mm.
issue that I always see with organizations where, on the one hand, you have people who come in where processes don't exist and they bring in their experience. We need to do everything under the sun to be able to move 1 inch.
Hmm.
On the other hand, you have sometimes organizations or teams, even within organizations, that have a bigger appetite for risk taking,
Hmm.
and that ends up becoming the groupthink, where one is more risk averse, the other is more risk taking. Now that you've moved into kind of a consulting role, I think data integrity, whether you're talking about Part 11, which isn't really data integrity, or Annex 11 in the EU, the details matter, but it doesn't tell you A, B, C, D. And I think
Hmm.
data integrity is one of those areas where, unless you're working with somebody who actually understands and has done multiple iterations of it before in different use cases, it can be either oversimplified in a bad way or it can be way overcooked. So,
Hmm.
how do you deal with the group think? And then talk to me about data integrity, generally speaking.
I think the regulations should not be overly prescriptive. I think that kind of boxes people into a certain way of doing things, and all organizations don't make the same stuff and they don't function in the same way. And you can't really, I don't think you can have a good risk based approach if everyone is thinking exactly the same way. We need different thinkers. We need people to bring in different perspectives. Now, how do I deal with that? I like to go around individually and get people's perspective on things, even if it's not during the actual meeting where people are expressing their ideas. After the meeting, I'll go up and, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we'll kind of work that into the risk assessments, because some of my favorite people are the people who are not even in those meetings. They're the SMEs that are on the floor and they know everything and they've been there for, 35 years, and they pick up the slack and no one even knows about it. So you go up to them, hey, what do you think about this? What's your take on this? And you have to work that in. You have to take their, and you have to kind of remove that pressure. And a lot of people are afraid of looking silly, and a lot of people are afraid of saying, what they perceive to be dumb or whatever. But we got to get past that, and we got to get people to speak up and to be brave and to own their thinking. I mean, everyone's thinking is valuable, everyone's got experience.
So, is CSV and Part 11 and data integrity all the same thing?
No, and I think that's one of my pet
This is
peeves
like
is
the
like
worst question possible.
data integrity is not just a CSV activity any more than like coming up with the process is a validation or a CSV activity. The validation, you are just verifying what you have set and that it works. Data integrity has to be designed in. You verify it, sure, with your CSV and your validation and all of that, but then it's got to be maintained. So the people who are the data stewards who are taking care of the data, they're manufacturing it, they're reviewing it, they're sending it out for approval, and they're releasing things. Those are the people that safeguard your data integrity. And so we can't say this is a CSV activity, because when you do CSV, you hand off the system, you're like, hey guys, it works, good luck. Let me know if anything changes or if anything breaks. We'll be here to help. But other than that, the CSV people are not standing in the back looking like, oh, what are you doing over there? So it's got to be the data stewards who are in the process, who are in the day to day, who are keeping track, who are staying vigilant in assessing the data for any breaches or lapses or anything like that.
So stack these up in a pyramid for me. What is the top of the pyramid? Is it data integrity? Everything falls under data integrity?
Everything.
Would you say CSV is a data integrity activity? Like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is the hierarchy as far as like where this fits in. And so, is data integrity the broadest category? And what you were describing as CSV is just one element, which makes me think of, well, what are the
Sure,
other elements?
you could have that.
Yeah. So, what is the top level? Data integrity. Yeah.
Data integrity is what we all want. This is what your business needs. Data integrity is for compliance, but data integrity is also for your business, because your data is your bread and butter at this point. This is what makes your product your product. This is what helps you hone in your process.
Right. And so, under data integrity, what are the different elements that fit into it?
Validation is one, CSV is one, and everybody else. You got IT, they're designing and they're making everything integrate. You got engineering, who's
What is
helping with
OT? OT?
operational technology. You've got engineering, who's helping with the systems and the process and the data quality. You've got procurement, you've got clinical, you've got facilities and maintenance. Everyone has a part to play in maintaining that data.
When I think of data integrity, I think of computer system validation, validating spreadsheets, but I also think of records management, procedure management, training, electronic signatures. Those are those are like that's the word. When I think of data integrity, that's the word cloud that comes in my mind. And I just don't know how to organize it because I'm not an expert in any one of those things. I just know they're all like hazily associated.
Yes, records are important. Electronic signatures help safeguard the data for, verification and security purposes. Yeah, that's the thing. We can't pin it down. Everyone wants you to pin down, like, tell me who's going to do data integrity. And it's really not just one person or a group of people or even a couple. It's literally everybody.
What is data integrity?
Data integrity is the completeness and the accuracy and the reliability and the trustworthiness of your data. And then you have the ALCOA++, which breaks down the 10 attributes of what goes specifically into the data integrity attributes.
So there's a second plus?
There's a second plus for traceability. Yes.
Traceability.
Yes.
Okay. When we talk about computer system validation, by and large, what are the things that need to be validated and how are they validated?
What are the things that need to be validated? Well, anything involved in your GXP process needs to be validated. You would need a risk assessment to tell you how critical your systems are and your data is. And then you just go ahead and write your requirements, test your requirements, make everything traceable, check your specs. Oh, and make sure to audit your vendors, make sure they're good vendors. And
what is considered a vendor in this case?
Anyone providing services to you.
But like, for example, to use a stupid example, like Microsoft Word, Microsoft wouldn't be considered a supplier.
No, I don't think so. I mean, technically they are, but you can't really do much with Microsoft because it's kind of just take it or leave it situation. They're not going to be working with you.
Because this is the area that I play in, and I've like read forums about supplier management and stuff like that. And in the GXP space, like one example that I've seen is like toilet paper. Like your toilet paper provider is not like a GXP supplier, even though it's something that is used in a GXP site, let's say, not for GXP purposes. Word is one of those things that has so much user-based input that you wouldn't validate, but you do validate spreadsheets if you're going to be using them for certain elements.
Are you using? No one's
using Word, correct?
Okay, yeah, not as.
I think it's just used for generating the documents, but they're approved in a validated system. So completeness. What is completeness?
Completeness is having all of your data and your metadata available to recreate the, whatever event you're trying to recreate. So everything has to be there and readily available.
That's an interesting one because then does test method validation fall under that?
I think it depends on how you view that. Test method validation is it a CSV thing? I don't think it would be a CSV. It would be a validation, definitely a validation, like a process validation.
Yes. When you're doing a CSV, how do you decide if the computer system requires validation? Is it the risk assessment?
Your risk assessment goes into it. Your requirements are big. You need to make sure that your requirements are fit for purpose.
And how do you do that?
Your requirements have to be testable. It depends on the requirement. Different requirements will be tested different ways, but they do have to have an acceptance criteria that you need to test and it needs to pass.
When it comes to GXP processes, I think one of the hard things is like people will want to develop a dashboard or a tool or a matrix or some rank ordering thing. And the question always is, do we need to validate that? And how do you answer, is it a GMP process? It's an easier question to answer than is it a GXP process? So how do you help people answer that question?
Well, what is the impact on the patient safety? What is the impact on the product? And what is the impact on the data integrity? And if there's impact there, then yeah, that needs to be explored and maybe broken down a little bit further as to which parts of that need to be validated.
Could you walk through a simple example of a system that you validated?
So you can pick any lab instrument on the bench. That lab instrument has requirements from the users. They will write those requirements down. I like to include everyone in those requirements. So all of the stakeholders that we mentioned will input. And then those requirements get turned into a test script, assuming we've done the risk assessment for those requirements and the functionality that it maps into. So usually there's a traceability matrix. We're mapping the requirements to the specs, and now we have to map that out to the protocol with all the test steps in it. So we do that. We execute. Deviations get documented. Anything that needs to be addressed or changed, that goes back into the living documents. So your requirements and your specs and your traceability matrix all gets updated. And then you write the report and then you release it. That's very simply put. We're not talking about integrations with other things. And we have to also take into account the maps of the data and the processes. So we've got to map the process, we've got to map the data and see where that fits in the bigger picture of things.
Yeah. I'm just trying because there's an element of like you're qualifying a piece of equipment to like, is it fit for its intended purpose? And that's the basic IQ, OQ, PQ that you would typically do on a piece of equipment. Is doing CSV the exact same way?
No, you want to make sure that the software and the hardware and the software around that piece of equipment is controlled. So we look at configuration, we look at integration, we look at the security of the systems, we look at roles and permissions, who has access to do what. We look at backup and archiving. Is there something in place in case of a disaster? Do we have a backup? Are we moving data off of production periodically and archiving that so we have that available so we can meet the ALCOA++ requirements? And all of that has to get tested, and you essentially make sure that it works, and then you put in your procedures in place so someone is actually doing that work periodically, however long, whatever the periods are for that work to be done.
When you're talking about integrations, like, are you talking about integrations into like data centers and network stuff, or
Yes.
is it something else?
Yeah. So if you're in a lab, sometimes there's a LIMS, and that data will get pulled into an overarching like laboratory information management system. And so instead of people printing out their things, that data directly goes into the overarching system that will house that information.
Why is LIMS so important? Because if you haven't worked with LIMS, LIMS is a software type that's used to control GMP data, but it's also used in GXP activity as well.
Mm-hmm.
As you get further down the development and as you get closer and closer to actual GMP, you have more or less control depending on how close you are. The closer you are to actual GMP, the less control and modification, et cetera, access you have. Why is LIMS a thing?
It's a part of your governance. So you want your data to be governed in the same way across multiple systems. You want it to be secured, and you want it all in one place so you can utilize your data and have your analytics and track your analyses. You want that data to be consistent, and you want it to be available, and you want to satisfy the ALCOA+ central governed location.
Do you do a lot of audits?
I do audits, yeah.
Are there ever any issues that come up where you're like, oh my gosh, how did you miss this? Are you guys serious?
Yeah, there's some things will come up, but I try not to react that way.
I'm not saying you actually react that way. I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that like where you're like, wow, I thought we were past this.
Yeah.
That anyone would. And so what are those things? Can you give an example?
We're looking at this one vendor that provided me the documentation of a very important system. And that system had this spec, and it said this is, GAMP 5 and Part 11 compliance. And I'm like, okay, so where are the specs? Where is the design, the design specification and software specification? They did not have one. There was nothing to show proof of this Part 11 compliance and this GAMP compliance. I put it in quotes because you don't comply to GAMP. So yeah, this system did not have an audit trail. It did not have very good security settings on it. The configurations were not there.
The audit trail, walk me through what that means.
So the audit trail is what keeps track of your who, what, where, when. Okay, so it tells you who is doing what, where did they do it. It's keeping track of your people, your dates, your times, the events that took place, any changes that took place also would be in there and captured with justification as to why there was a change.
You were talking about some of the issues that you see when you're auditing or starting to work with a company. What are the others? The example that you gave was they say their system is compliant, but it's neither compliant to the guideline GAMP or Part 11 because they didn't have a design spec or a software spec. If you don't have a spec, you don't have a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
You haven't tested anything, or at least nothing that is based on what your intended output is. Mm-hmm. What are other things that get people caught up?
A lot of vendors might not have good quality management systems. They don't have good data governance in place. They don't have proof of it, at least. They don't show it to you. I also like to see how they respond to me. Some of them are not very responsive. They like to gauge, how are your answers to my questions? Are they good? Are they detailed? Or are they very light and lacking? Are you timely in your responses? Do you want to actually help me and work with me? Or are you kind of just like seeing this as a burden or like let's finish this as quickly as possible? Because your vendors are very important in your process and they should be working with you hand in hand and not you just viewing this as a business transaction and let's get it over with as soon as possible sort of thing.
You've mentioned data governance a couple of times. What does that mean?
What does that mean? So your data governance is how you like to essentially control your data and your process and those people that are touching that data. Was everyone just doing their own thing? Or all the teams just kind of having their own procedures in their own way that they like to work about their systems? Or is there an overarching theme in the company that everyone is on board with and everyone is utilizing? Is everybody aware of their personal impact to the data, or are we just kind of going through the motions and blindly following their SOPs? So there needs to be some sort of mutual understanding and control around the data that's being generated.
If you were to try and teach someone data integrity, what are the most important documents to understand?
The regulations, and PIC S41 is a really good place to start. I think that outlines essentially start to finish data governance and data integrity together and how to go about doing that. I think that's a pretty good one.
And then, well, there's like, what is Part 11? Because people use it as data integrity and it's not, right?
It's not out.
21 CFR, I should say, not Andraos.
Yes. 21 CFR Part 11. It's your control over your electronic systems, which it contains principles for data integrity, of course. It doesn't mention ALCOA++ outwardly, but your electronic records, your electronic signatures are in Part 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the European version.
But it goes into a lot more detail.
And the new draft goes into even more detail. So we'll see what they do with that.
What does PICS 41 give you an understanding of?
It gives you an understanding of how to go about data integrity in your organization. So from your personnel to your management, to your systems, to your documentation, because data integrity isn't just like a computer thing, it's all of your data. So if you have hybrid systems, you need to take into account anything that you're putting on paper as well, which is why we want to move away from paper and keep everything in its original form.
ALCOA is not actually in any U.S. regulation, right?
Not in the regulations.
Not in U.S. regulations. Do you know why that is? Because it's table stakes basically at this point, and they do expect it. Is it just that they haven't updated in a long time?
The United States regulations don't update as quickly as they do in other parts of the world.
So the second plus is traceability.
Mm-hmm. So
Why couldn't they just feed it into the first plus because it's already plus, but whatever. It makes no sense to me. Some people write out the full acronym without the plus, and it looks completely ridiculous. So that I
Yeah.
know why they did the plus, but the plus is making me scratch my head. So traceability, what does that mean?
So traceability, you have a complete line of understanding of your data when it went through the process. So let's say you went through the process and now you're archiving it. You need to be able to reconstruct all of the events that got you to that data that you have archived. So that includes the audit trail, probably who did that, when did it happen, what were the events around it. We can't have missing pieces. You can't just export a PDF. You need the whole story behind that PDF.
Yeah, okay, understood. So basically, the way that I typically edit episodes is I'll upload the files into my video editor, and
Okay.
then once they're uploaded, I'll put them in, I'll create a copy, and then I'll do the multicam where I split like the me versus the person that I'm talking to, and it'll go me asking a question and then them answering. And then I'll create another file of like maybe cleaning up the silences, reorganizing, and then I'll create another one that's removing ums and uhs. And then
Okay.
you can literally see like the stage one edit, which is just the two files on top of each other. And then once I did step B, C, D, E until the end. And so it sounds like that's a similar thing with traceability, where not only do you have the ALCOA plus, but you could follow the path forward and backward and get the same result.
Yes, we have to keep all the data and the metadata associated with it.
How would you advise that somebody who's unfamiliar with data integrity dips their toes and understands the basics, maybe reduces their anxiety around it? Because I do find that this is an area that even for people who are really, really experienced and have qualified processes from soup to nuts for 30 years, the data integrity piece is still an area that gives them pause.
Yeah, I think data integrity sounds scarier than what it actually is because the data that you safe keep in your process. And so there's really nothing to be scared of. We just have to take care of it. Now, someone who's just starting out, I think getting really good training, and I don't mean like, just get on YouTube. I mean good training from good training instructors, and then find someone on the data integrity team and pick their brain and help them out because they will need your input as the SME and the process SME to help them, see things from your perspective, to help us with our data integrity from maybe outside of the department. It's never going to be as good as someone who's within in the trenches, safeguarding that data with the data integrity attributes. So definitely get good training. And then as with anything, get your reps in, look at your systems, go through your systems, see what kind of gaps there could exist currently and try to patch those up. I think that's ever static. It's something that's always ongoing.
Where can people find you, Monika?
On my LinkedIn, my website, dunamiscompliance.com.
Thank you for coming on. This was great.